It's no real secret that Counter-Strike 2 launched in a somewhat rushed state. With rampant glitches, server issues, cheating, and a fraction of the content of its direct replay C, Valve has obviously had their hands full with trying to get CS2 on its feet and running. Now, while many have chosen to focus on the widespread prevalence of cheaters, and rightly so I might add, I want to focus on a problem that I don't see a lot of content about: the casual experience. FPS games should, in my opinion, have 3 tiers of play baked in. Silly goof-off modes where players can just have fun and not care about skill. A casual-oriented mode for players of any skill level to play with friends. And a ranked mode where players can compete and put their skills to the test. Counter-Strike 2, as it sits now, does ostensibly have these 3 tiers of play. There's casual mode and a couple less serious modes to goof off in, competitive mode to play without the pressure of ranking, and a ranked mode called Premier to actually be competitive. However, beyond the weird naming scheme, which has certainly confused many a new player, I think the current offerings actually don't really fulfill those purposes, and that leads to a weakened casual experience, and by extension, a weakened competitive experience. Currently, to get into Counter-Strike, you already have to know quite a bit about what Counter-Strike is and want to play it before you even download the game. And that is a problem that largely stems from a lack of onboarding features for new players. While it's not a problem in the immediate future, not having good onboarding means the influx of new players is limited, which becomes a problem when stretched out over time. So I'd like to offer my opinion on 3 things I think Counter-Strike could be doing better to bring in new players. Starting with, fans of CSGO will most likely remember the old training day map that slowly walked the player through the fundamentals of gameplay. Framed as a narrative piece where an in-universe instructor walked you through a bomb defusal scenario and handling firearms, it served as a starting point for people who were just picking up the game to get a feel for what they were in for. There was even a firing range course at the end to test your speed and accuracy. Now, it was a far cry from a complete lesson on the rules of economy and strategy in Counter-Strike, but those things would have been a nice addition at the end of the scenario. In CS2, the training day map has been replaced with a tutorial that I can only describe as utterly sterile. You get spawned into an empty map, given information about movement and gun buying through some on-screen text prompts, and then walk through the process of planting a bomb and shooting some enemies. There's not even a voiceover to walk you through it. It's just simple, cold text plastered on your screen and a few bots popping up to serve as dummy targets for you to shoot. While the CS2 tutorial does a marginally better job instructing players on the actual rules of play, it fails abysmally to be compelling or interesting while doing so. CSGO's tutorial, by contrast, was actually fun to play, to race against your time in the firing range, work on your precision and spray control, or avoid the... Of course, neither tutorial actually does a good job explaining economy to the player, so it should come as no surprise that your teammates throw by full buying every single round. I would have preferred if CS2 had ported the old tutorial, but added on sections explaining economy, and things like weapon sharing or using smokes and molotovs for positional advantages. CS2's tutorial is functional at best, but I had hoped for more, not less than CSGO. This may well be a recurring theme in CS2, especially when we look at how they've approached. Part of what I had hoped for with Counter-Strike 2 was an expansion of game modes. Maybe a reworking of the hostage mode to be competitively viable instead of invariably degenerating into team deathmatch, or polishing some of the modes that played with the rules of the game entirely, like Flying Scoutsman or Arms Race. However, following the theme of the previous section, even all of the old content we had in CSGO didn't make it over into CS2. Arms Race recently made a reappearance, but with only 2 maps to play on, feels like a husk of its former self. Flying Scoutsman has yet to even resurface. Now, I understand that mapping is probably the part of development that takes the most resources, especially when your standard of quality, both in terms of visuals and gameplay flow, has improved as drastically between versions as it has from CSGO to CS2. All of that said, I believe that even having all the old maps and silly modes from CSGO doesn't necessarily fill the gaps in terms of providing a casual experience. Other modes like Deathmatch and the aptly named Casual mode also could benefit from not just a fresh coat of paint, but a reworking under the hood. Of course, bear in mind that this is all just my opinion, so if you disagree at any point, be sure to stop the video and leave an angry comment. While you're down there, why not hit the like button and subscribe so you can get mad at future content? Deathmatch isn't a mode I've ever been particularly fond of, and CS2's version of Deathmatch feels like a half-baked attempt to bring something other than competitive or casual onto the matchmaking menu. I would also have loved it if they had found some way to make hostage mode more viable, at least for casual play, without it effectively being a substitute for team deathmatch. Clearly, the intricacies of making that work would involve hours of thinking about game balance and potentially changing the base game rules of weapon selections, so I'll leave that for the people who get paid big bucks to think about those things. But I will say that it sucks to basically have a game mode with an objective that no one plays because the alternative is easier. When it comes to CS2's official casual game mode, it's a simple copy-paste of CSGO, which is unfortunate since there's so much room for improvement. Now I'm going to linger here for a minute because I think this is possibly the most important thing to address for the future. And if Valve can get casual mode right, it will help onboard new players in a way that it simply doesn't at the moment. As I said earlier, having silly modes doesn't necessarily fill the need for casual experiences. In my view, casual should be simply a less strict rule set of the same game as competitive mode. Going back to the analogy at the start, you want silly modes where there's no real rules, a casual mode where you can play the game but not care about ranking, and a ranked mode. Currently, competitive fills that unranked quota, but since competitive shares its rule sets completely with Premier, it's functionally just Premier but please don't rate me, meaning that the skill floor is still just as high as Premier. I would propose that the organization of the game modes be shifted slightly. Instead of grouping casual in the silly modes, I think it should replace competitive as the proper unranked experience. I believe this would also make more sense in the mind of a new player who expects the mode labeled casual to not be a complete joke. Premier remains as the ranked competitive mode, but optionally you could toggle off ranking to play a serious game based on your rating, but without affecting it. In moving casual up a rung, some things obviously would have to change. First of all, you would have to remove universal spectating. I am honestly baffled that this still exists in a mode that seems to play like a regular game mode, since it incentivizes people to stack players in a voice call and share information, removing any form of competitive integrity. Secondly, there are simply too many players in casual. You won't learn positioning or rotation timings from playing casual as it stands currently, and will often simply die because you can't cover every angle on a map that 10 opponents could attack from. I would propose that the number be reduced to the standard 5v5, especially if you're going to use the same maps as competitive. Hey, editing lemon drop here. I was getting some more footage for this video, and I noticed that if you load into a casual bot match, it will be 5 versus 5 and not 10v10, which is what I am advocating for in official matchmaking servers. Okay, back to the video. Now, I can already hear the comments.
But Lemon, you're just turning casual into what we already have in the form of competitive mode.
Well, not exactly. Although I do think it's better to have fewer rule changes to explain when going from casual to competitive, especially rules as impactful as player count and information availability. With that said, I do think casual should have some quality of life features that differentiate it from your competitive mode. Currently in casual, players don't have to buy armor or defuse kits, saving them money every round that they can spend on weapons and utility. I would expand this rule set to also include potentially giving players an automatic flashbang or grenade. The purpose of casual to a new player should be to familiarize yourself with the game, and giving players utility right off the bat would incentivize them to use it every round and play around with lineups, pop flashes, or just generally getting a feel for throwables. Secondarily, I would also include the damage report immediately to help players understand when their shots are hitting or not. Spray control in Counter-Strike is a big deal, and helping players understand when they're hitting or missing would help them develop that crucial skill. While we're thinking about ways to improve casual, I would suggest maybe some changes to the armor system, maybe no head armor in round 1 to more accurately simulate pistol rounds in competitive, but then we're starting to get into things like competitive balance, and that's not really the point of this video. Lastly, I would bring back the kill cam in casual. Now, this does seem contradictory to removing universal spectating, but I think the fundamental difference is that it would show players how they were outplayed a few seconds ago so that they can improve, rather than just giving massive amounts of current information and effectively X-ray vision to players so they can cheat. Casual's current iteration of having live spectating but no kill cams feels like the worst of both worlds. Of course, Valve is unlikely to take my small diatribe and implement it directly, but I mainly put this together just to point out that the current system doesn't provide a good solution for the middle ground of messing around and competing seriously. Either bringing competitive closer to casual, or casual closer to competitive, would help new players bridge the skill gap instead of diving right into the deep end of comp and premiere. Not everyone wants to play the official game mode either, so that's why it's necessary to introduce. Even once the old CSGO game modes of Team Deathmatch, Flying Scoutsman, and potentially even Danger Zone get added back into CS2, I still think that they only scratch the surface of what's possible within the sandbox, especially with the expanded power of Source 2. There's not a lot to say here, but CS2's pickings for game modes for casual players are awfully slim at the moment. I'm not trying to say that it needs a Battle Royale mode or it's going to die, but the new modes that don't play by the same rules as the main game certainly wouldn't hurt its broader appeal. I don't really have a ton of suggestions, but it would be neat to see Valve officially implement popular community modes like Surfing, Arena, or Retakes as official modes. And yes, I realize that formally recognizing new modes means they have to dedicate server space to it, and if they take it away, regardless of how low the player count gets, they'll get whined at. With that said, there are ways to implement limited time modes to test traction, or have a rotating experimental mode queue. And these kinds of modes would certainly help in filling the goofing off portion of casual play, and serve to get people in the door, although perhaps at a lower rate than overhauling the main casual modes would. Now maybe it's just me, but it seems like spending some resources on keeping onboarding numbers high is a reasonable. It seems like Valve has plenty to keep themselves busy at the moment. Obviously, as many other creators have pointed out, the cheating problem is remarkably frustrating and something Valve needs to work on. They're also clearly cooking a lot of other things for CS2, and despite its frustrating state on release, they've followed through on their plans to continuously update, and more regularly than CSGO was updated. The whole point of upgrading to Source 2 was that tools and pipeline meant easier updates in the future. And with the recent Call to Arms update, Valve demonstrated that they are sticking to that plan. Some people speculate that an operation is coming soon, and there's data in the files implying an unreleased terrorist hunt mode, which would alleviate some of the pressure on casual players who don't want to immediately jump into the deep end of competitive play just to practice. At the present, however, it does feel like Valve has just left the casual player base to their own devices on community servers to get their fix. And that is a problem that I hope they address in the very near future. So that's all I have to say about this topic. If you enjoyed the video, hit like and subscribe, and I will catch you all in the future. As always, thank you for watching, and long may the sun shine.